Hmm.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Board of Directors of the Santa Barbara Metropolitan Transit District. Before I begin the meeting, in the honor of Labor Day, I'd like to recognize the public service of all the men and women who provide such great service to the community here in Santa Barbara from the Metropolitan Transit District. Thank you all for the efforts that you make for all of us. I'm going to start with a roll call of the Board of Directors. When I call your name, please answer that you are present or yes. Director Sarkar.
Present.
Director Lemberger.
Present.
Director Perotti.
Present. Can you
Director,
Can
Go
you
ahead.
see me? Can you? I'm
Yes,
sorry.
yes, I can. You're all good.
Okay, because I can't see myself, so that's fine.
You're
All right,
looking
one
good,
second.
Paula. Your camera's good, your sound's good, everything is working well. Director McQuarrie, I don't see. We'll mark him as absent for now. Director Sheeler,
Present.
good. Bill, your sound's working well. Vice Chair Tabor.
Here.
And Chair Davis is here. We do have a quorum and we will begin the meeting. Let me start with a report regarding the posting of the agenda, please.
Morning. The agenda was posted on Thursday, September 2nd, 2021 at MTD's administrative office, mailed and emailed to those on the agenda list, and posted on MTD's website.
Good. Thank you very much, Christina. That takes us to the consent calendar. There are two items this morning. First, item 4 is the approval of the minutes for the meeting of July 20th, 2021. And number 5, the cash report for the following dates, July 10th through July 23rd, July 24th through August 6th, and August 7th through August 27, 2021. I do have a comment on the minutes themselves. That particular meeting, we had one absent, and all of the votes that we have here basically show like a 5-1 or a 6-1. We didn't really have negative votes, I don't believe. I think all of those items really ought to be 5-0 with one absent, or 5-0, one absent, one abstention, then basically 6-0, one absent. So in the maker of the motion, you can include those updates to the minute. That would be helpful. Are there any questions? Great. Are there any questions or comments other than that on either the minutes or the cast reports? Director Sheeler.
Thank you, Chair. 2 questions. This is on the cash report. And I noticed that we now have the little indicator DBA next to some of these entries. And it indicates that FedEx is a DBA. I guess I just don't understand how that works. If somebody could maybe explain that to me.
Yeah, I'll have to get back to you on that the next board meeting, Director Sheeler, to verify. I mean, I can make an assumption, but I'd rather confirm what I believe there.
Okay, yeah, I just thought it had to do with disadvantaged businesses, and a $1 trillion business. I was trying to understand how it's a DBA. And then the last one has to do with the city of Santa Barbara, a claim settlement for $25,000.
Yes, it's a result of a claim put forward by the city regarding an incident with some of their equipment and ours. So.
Okay, thank you.
Director Sarkar.
I just had a quick, thank you, Chair. I just had a quick question about how, like on the cash report specifically, or where possibly the California low carbon fuel standard credits and the renewable fuel standard. I don't think it's for this specific one, but maybe in the future, or maybe I just elaborate where it might show up as those start to grow in size. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I could respond. It could be added to the cash report. It also could be a part of our quarterly report when we report miles, that sort of thing, fleet information and track it, but it does have potential for monetary, so it could be a cash report. I'd say at some point, maybe when we're back to committee meetings, first of the year, the Finance, Human Resource and Risk Committee could address that particular issue and make a recommendation where they'd like to see it.
That sounds perfect. Thank you, Jerry.
Okay.
Good question. Okay, other questions on the minutes or the cash report? Not seeing any. Do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
Motion to approve, Chair.
Okay, and that's with the amended minutes as I pointed out.
Correct.
Good. Do I have a motion? Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Director Tabor. Roll call vote. Director Sarkar.
Yes, aye.
Director Lemberger.
Aye.
Director Parodi,
Aye.
Director McCrory is absent, Director Sheeler,
Yes.
Director Vice Chair Tabor,
Yes.
and Chair Davis votes yes. The consent calendar is approved unanimously. Thank you very much. And that then moves us on to public comment. This is item 6. This is public comment for items that are not on our current agenda, but within the purview of the MTD board. Madam Clerk, do we have anybody who wishes to speak under general public comment?
I have no comments at this time.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Takes us to our first substantive item, item 7. This is the approval of the Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan. Mr. Strada, you want to kick it off?
Yeah, happily. Chair Davis, members of the board, good morning. This particular item is going to be coming back to you once a year. It's a new requirement for the Federal Transit Administration. And I'm going to hand it off to Mary Gregg, our Chief Operating Officer, Safety Officer, to walk you through the specifics. Mary?
All right. Well, good morning, Chair Davis and members of the board. I think this is the first presentation I've made to introduce myself to our new board members. So I would like to welcome Director Lemberger and Director Sarkar, and I look forward to working with both of you. So the Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan was rolled out by the FTA in 2018, and it became effective in 2019. It's basically an opportunity for the FTA to look towards certain transportation operators who receive Section 5307 funds to bring everybody together in a community of practice. We call it PTASP, Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan. And essentially it sets the framework by which transit and rail now have a common language, if you will, on developing safety management systems. And those safety management systems are processes and procedures that the agencies follow to carry out these activities under SMS, is basically what we call it for short. And out of that is what's called an agency safety plan. And the plan itself is the document that defines all of these processes. The great thing about this agency safety plan and PTASP rule in general is that it's very flexible and scalable. So the goal is for each agency to work amongst itself with its key stakeholders to develop what works for the actual agency. So our agency's safety plan, MTDs, is built upon kind of an existing foundation of our current safety practices and training that we already have in place. So in November of 2020, staff brought the first version of the agency safety plan to the board for official adoption. And as Mr. Estrada mentioned, this is an annual process. So originally the timeline was a July to a July, but because of the pandemic, the FTA put out a couple notices of discretion, meaning essentially they moved when the requirement to certify your agency plan would be. So staff presented in November, the board adopted it. We self-certified our plan in December of 2020 through our certifications and assurances process. And staff picked September as the first jumping off point to bring back to the board any potential changes to the plan. And then when we get in line with July of 2021, that's where we're going to be presenting on an annual basis any updates moving forward. So at this point, we have very minor changes to the plan. We're just getting into the implementation phase. The FTA finally put the certification requirement as July of 2021. And the FTA has announced that all transit and rail agencies under PTASP are 100% certified. So this next year is about implementation. So the implementation process.
You want to open the window and or open the door? Yes. Because you're also not focusing.
Sorry about that. So the implementation process right now that we are working on, we're very focused on a gap analysis of what our current documentation and record keeping consolidation. We're looking into available software and technology solutions in order to roll this out agency-wide. We're coordinating with key stakeholders. We're evaluating training needs for the various roles and responsibilities that are outlined in the agency safety plan, which the plan itself is attached to the today's staff report. And then also in this next year, we're going to be initiating an employee safety reporting system. So with that, staff is presenting to the board today a recommendation to approve the updated, what we now call version 2 agency safety plan. And we will be back in July again to start off on the annual process from there. And I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody has regarding this version and PTASP in general.
Great. Thank you, Mary, for the presentation. And I apologize for the Zoom mistake there by not muting myself. So
Okay.
that's one of the first times I've done that. That's pretty embarrassing.
Well, it is a little warm and muggy today, so.
Questions for Mary on safety plan here? Bill, go ahead. Director Schiller.
Thank you, Chair. I think I have 3 questions. Do requirements change if MTD's service area population increases?
The requirements do not change. The definition of whether we're a small or a large provider would be the only change, and that would be relative to our actual service levels. So right now we're considered a small provider because we have less than 100 vehicles out in peak revenue service, and that's how that defines where you are on the cusp. If we ever moved into a large provider, then there is one additional requirement that would be added into the agency safety plan. But it's not dependent on service area.
Okay. Thank you. My next question, I think, refers to training needs. Wanted to ask, how are comments from customers and passengers shared with applicable managers?
Well, currently we have a process that's managed through our marketing department with our Zendesk platform, and any information that's coming through that is provided to the managers within the department that it pertains to. As we're looking to find some software and technology solutions over the course of this next year, we'll be using something like that, a software where we'll be able to take some of those items as they relate to safety. And again, this is for the agency safety plan, and roll those into a database that will help assist us moving forward.
Okay, and my last question has to do with safety. Are there any changes potentially as the fleet converts to an electric fleet?
That's a great question. I think that MTD, we have a solid footing in training on electric vehicles. So training needs specific would be to the vehicle type. And so we work with all the training materials that are provided to us, start off with the manufacturer and what the vehicle has to present itself. But as far as that goes, no, I think we're in a pretty good footing on that type of training.
Thank you very much. Those are my questions.
Great. Other questions from anyone? Director Limburger, Jen.
There you are.
Yes, I have two questions related to the ESRP. Is that something that had already existed before this, or has it been built in as part of the ASP? And also curious as to how, based on how long it's been in implementation, how the perception of staff reaction, staff engagement in that process has been.
Okay, so a formal employee safety reporting program will encompass agency-wide. So I think it's important for me to note that This is something that's not just in operations, it's not just maintenance, it is an agency-wide. So we have several already solid foundations on processes that are in place for any employee within the agency to bring forward any concerns related to safety. PTASP is a very data-driven process. And so right now we've been very paper-driven on this with incident accident reports or comments and questions and suggestions. So the software that we're looking into will really help us provide a platform by which we can have instant access to data and information on that front. So I think the answer is yes, we absolutely have something in place already for people to report. Are we looking to formalize and enhance that program? Absolutely. And there's always areas where we're looking to for that communication, because the communication is both ways. So PTASP provides an opportunity for not only the employee to report, but how we would communicate back to that employee or to the organization as a whole, what kind of mitigations or risk assessments or hazard identifications and what we've done with it.
Great. And then simpler question, the safety committee is mentioned several times throughout, and I don't know if I saw or missed it, but about how often does the safety committee meet?
So as part of this upcoming year of implementation and looking at our gap analysis and what our current processes are, we'll be formalizing that a little bit more as we move forward. We have other avenues by which we have various safety committees and reviews of things already in place. So the path that we'll be looking at for how often that will happen will be over the course of this next year. An agency safety plan is really a living, breathing document. The goal in it is to always be looking and evaluating. So while staff will be back annually to present any updates to the board, if there are significant changes along that path, then we will come before the board at that time to have an approval on any major changes that would happen.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions from board members? Director Tabor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mary, nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Been a while.
I'm interested in learning about safety hazards that are identified, if any are identified. And I know in our quarterly reports, we get a report or an accounting of complaints and resolutions.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's a proper way to inform us of any safety hazards that are identified, maybe either there or through the HR and Risk Committee. But think about how you might make us aware of those.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Good question. Other questions? I have one quick one on page 7, the performance targets. It says that the performance targets are essentially calculated based on a 5-year average. And there's a set period here, 15 to 19, I think, something like that.
Yes.
My question is, so if we have a bad year in there and the average goes skewed one way, that's become our target. Okay. And then do we update this every 5 years? I mean, what's the updating process to basically set new performance targets based upon actual performance? What my question was, it seems that the performance targets are set upon your actual performance. And if you had a bad performance, your target would be bad.
So as I mentioned, the great thing about the agency safety plan and the whole umbrella of the PTASP rule is for the agencies to be able to look at what works within the organization. At the outset of the rollout of PTASP, kind of an industry standard, if you will, on the get-go was for people to look at a 5-year trend. As people are doing a deep dive into their agency safety plan, they're looking at what works best for the organization, if that should continue to be a 5-year trend, if a 3-year trend makes sense, or just look at it from an annual basis. Staff looked to a 5-year trend because we thought that was a better picture at this time. It's how we present, as Director Tabor mentioned, information on other matters such as our general liability, workers' comp, and trends like that. Staff will be updating those performance targets when we come back in July to look across the board at 2020 as well as 2021 at that point. They're called SPTs, and they're required to be set based on some performance measures set by the National Public Transportation Plan. But the time frame and the averages we use can be determined by each agency.
Thank you, Mary.
Welcome.
Other questions? Okay, not seeing any. I'm going to ask the clerk, is anyone wishing to speak from the public under this particular item?
I don't have any public comments at this time.
Thank you, Christina. Takes us back to the board. The recommendation is to approve MTD's Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan. So do I have a motion to any effect here? Director
Chair, I
Tabor.
move that we approve the P-task.
PTAS, there you go. Now we got acronyms. There you gotta do the acronyms. Yeah, Dave, come on.
Just wanted to make a motion so that I could say that.
Does anyone second that motion? Looking for a second. Director Lemberger has seconded, so we have a motion and a second to approve the PTAS. Thank you, Dave. I will do a roll call vote. Director Sarkar,
Aye.
Director Lemberger,
Aye.
Director Perotti,
Aye.
Director McCrory is absent. Director Sheeler,
Yes.
Director Vice Chair Tabor,
Yes.
and I vote yes. That motion passes unanimously with one absent. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mary.
All right.
She went. There you go.
I'm still here. Thank you very much. And if I could just conclude by, I would like to give a large thank you to a couple individuals who've been assisting me with this process and really got a good jumping off point on the development of our implementation plan and our gap analysis. And that would be Manny Castanon, our safety and training administrator, as well as Tony Mendibles, our assistant safety training and administrator, who's just come on board in that role. This is definitely an agency-wide process, and there are a couple of the key people who've really been assisting me to get to this point today. So I just wanted to give a quick thank you to them.
Great, thanks. And give thanks to the board, to those individuals also. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on then to item 8. This is fiscal year 2021 annual ridership and customer service report.
Chair Davis, just two items really quick before I introduce this item. Number one, Director McQuarrie did reach out. He's having technical issues, will not be able to participate today. I'll provide him a briefing after the meeting. Secondly, I want to acknowledge Mary for her work, getting the PTAS going during a pandemic and managing the pandemic. Very impressive work. Thank you, Mary. Way to bring the team together and get it done. On the current item, I'm going to hand this off to Hillary Blackerby, our planning and marketing manager, to walk you through the annual ridership and customer service report. Hillary, it's all yours.
Hillary Blackerby, thank you.
Thank you very much. Hi, Chair and Board. Good to be with you today. So I am here to talk about ridership and customer service from last fiscal year. It was a wild one for obvious reasons. So we'll go through what's going on here, and the staff report and the ridership summary should have colored in some of the details, but we'll walk through our basic. Just to switch pages here. All right. So these are the same key performance indicators that we review every quarter, and so this is sort of a fourth quarter and total fiscal year update. So we look at by fare category, passengers, revenue hours and miles, things like that. Top 5 lines by ridership, so which ones had the highest ridership, top 5 lines by passengers per hour, And then we have sort of numbers at a glance that are things we track: bicycles, wheelchairs, other ridership aspects, and then on-time performance. So get started here. So this one has looked strange for about 1.5 years because we weren't charging fares, or we weren't collecting them for quite a while. So from about March 19th of 2020 until May, well, the last day we didn't collect was May 9th of 2021. And so these are not particularly useful, charts at this moment, because the variance here of looking at last fiscal year, well, 2 fiscal years ago versus the one that just ended, other is where the free category lives. So when you see in the teal, which is this fiscal year we're talking about, fiscal year 21, it's very, very low, nearly imperceptible in adult students and senior and disabled. And that's because we weren't charging or, categorizing folks. Did we have adult students and seniors and people with disabilities on the bus? Of course we did, but they weren't getting charged. So everybody was getting lumped in to the other category. Now, of course, at the very end of this last fiscal year, we did collect fares from May 10th until, the end of June for that. So there is a little bit in there, but it's hard to have it be well perceived on a chart, since it was a long year with no fare collection for the most part. So, but what were we doing with passengers, hours, and miles? So, we're measuring, the fourth quarter is the first time. So the fourth quarter of 2021 is the first time we're measuring against a previous quarter that involved the pandemic, right? Except for, so there were a couple weeks in March of 2020 where we had regular ridership, pre-lockdown and all of that. But functionally, it was really the fourth quarter where we got hit with the bulk of the shutdown and the pandemic. So we did this quarter, this past fourth quarter, have more ridership than the year before. So the year prior, we'd carried 405,412. We upped that by, about 280,000 folks. And then for the year in 1920, traditionally on a regular year, we're having 6.4 million total passenger trips per year. Fiscal year 20, it was 5.1. We had a really strong year. And then we had a 1.5 month with, very, very low ridership. So you can kind of see how strong fiscal year 20 was, if you consider it basically had a quarter chunk taken out of it, and we still got to 5.1. So last fiscal year, we did not meet that, but 2.3, 2.4 million passenger trips, considering what was going on in the community. We know that these were essential trips. These were essential workers. These were people who were getting around with our service. We take that very seriously, and we're very proud of that. That's still a lot of people getting moved around. When it comes to revenue hours for the year, so just looking at the year to date, so the whole fiscal year, we had fewer revenue hours, right? So 172,903, down, not a drastic amount, but we know that it's those lines that serve university and city college, a few of them, right? 15X, 16, 28 that have been suspended. And then also the shuttles services not having run. But you can see we did still quite a lot of revenue service and revenue miles despite that. Passengers per revenue hour was 13.8, which is actually, it's been ticking up every month. I mean, well, yes, every month, but also every quarter. But obviously we were once in a much better position on that. One thing to take into account is our capacity on the bus. So we, throughout the pandemic, have limited it. For example, on a 40-foot bus, it's been anywhere from limiting it 12 people to 15 to 20, whereas now we're at a seated load, which is about 38. And so as that has happened, you can only go so high on passengers per revenue hour. And so there's obviously a large gulf between 15 people on the bus and how many we used to fit on pre-pandemic, because we could take standing loads. So that's sort of the difference there. So top 5 lines by ridership, these have actually been in the same order for the whole year, for the whole fiscal year. And so line 11 and line 6, really those workhorse routes in the State and Hollister corridor. Lines 1 and 2, east side and west side, very consistent, very regular service. And line 20 to Carpinteria, they're just very well used anyway. But during the pandemic, they've been very well used too. We know that those are corridors where a lot of people live and a lot of people work. And so we were very proud to have kept those services at regular service levels throughout the pandemic until today. And we know that it was very necessary and very appreciated and well used, not just based on the numbers, but what we hear from the public. And then passengers per hour. This is top 5 lines by passengers per hour. So the line 1, when you look at these, when you look at passengers per hour, you want to look at how sort of long those trips are, and then ridership. So this kind of blends those together. So the line 1 and 2 and 17, those are pretty short routes. They just zip through, the 17 zips through the lower west to City College, lines 1 and 2, just around the east and west side neighborhoods to downtown, and they're interlined. And so when you have a pretty short trip and you have pretty good ridership, you see a higher passenger per hour count. Line 11 and 6, those are pretty long trips, end to end, from downtown to the university and out to Stork and Hollister. But this kind of shows you, despite that, they still have very high passengers per hour, considering. Now, looking at these versus if you were looking at, say, the third quarter of 2020, or say the second quarter, these are just basement level numbers, because we were having things like, 45 on the line 28, we would have 80 passengers per hour, right? We had so much service every 10 minutes, most of the day. So we had to sort of shift our how we gauge these things, and how we want to be fairly gentle with ourselves, of knowing that we're trying to climb out of a very big hole. And the good thing about passengers per hour on all of these lines, every quarter we've increased. So they've been going up. So we really haven't had to dip back down, which is good. So then for the fiscal year, total ridership down 53.9%. Makes sense, again, because we're comparing it to basically a year with 3 really good quarters. At capacity loads, I mentioned that they sort of stopped measuring that as much, and more 2 full to board, because it was really easy to get to 2 full to board when you're only allowing 15 to 20 people on, and those were up 21.9%. If you look at each month and each quarter, it's all variable. Having the last few months of increased capacity, that definitely made this number reduced some. And then wheelchair boardings and bicycles carried. If we look at total ridership, down 53.9%, but wheelchair boardings were only down 14%, bicycles only down 1.5%. I mention this every quarter, but throughout the pandemic, we've seen tremendous bicycle use on our buses. And so a lot of folks are pairing those trips up, maybe extending them with the bike or biking a little more than they would have taken the bus. But we've seen obviously a significant amount of people sort of like bicycles per passenger going up this year, which is great. And I think we're poised to carry a few more, but we're definitely seeing them used more and more. On-time performance. So just as an update, and I'm gonna sort of do some remedial updating here, even though we have a board member who's joined since the last time I did one of these. So, you know, it's been a little over 5 years since we installed our CAD ABL system that tracks all of this real-time information about where our buses are. It's really just been a couple years since we've been able to fully get our arms around and reckon with the reporting system and what it means. We've worked to refine lots of our service to make sure that the schedule matches with what's actually happening based on traffic and all that kind of stuff. So we're really proud that we've gotten really far. And so we have a metric that's lines that are 80% and lower on time. And on time for us is defined as late is more than 5 minutes late, and early is more than a minute early. And so we look at lates and earlies and really try to prevent those earlies, especially because that is 100% preventable. So that's what we look at. If anything dips below 80%, we really zoom in and say what's going on, what lines, what trips. This last August service change that just took place is the first time since I've been here, and certainly first time since we've had this system that we haven't had to make on-time performance changes to our schedule that we published, which is a big success, I would say. So we break it out even further here, 95% to 100%, all these little 5% chunks, so that we can really get granular on what's going on. So while the 80 to 84% is red, just because those are sort of the color wheel in Excel that this comes out of, all of these are still above our performance target of 80%. Those two lines that got that were line 20 and line 27. And, you know, we're still taking a look at those, but we still feel pretty good that, you know, most of the time they're doing tremendously well. So as I'll show you later in our customer service numbers, it's really borne out in what we're hearing from people, in addition to what our technology tells us. And then my favorite kind of donut chart to show you 100% of our trips. This generally, if we weren't doing as well, this would be a more interesting chart, but is a system-wide on-time performance by amount of service on lines. So for example, if we had the line, let's say line 25 was under 80%, you would be able to see on here, there's not, that's a line that we don't have a ton of service on. So you would be able to see how many trips in the grand scheme of how many trips we have are below 80%. Now this doesn't mean there were no individual trips below 80%, but this means that on the whole, as an average, each line, nothing was below 80%, if that makes sense. Customer service statistics. It's another aspect that the planning and marketing department reckons with, and we have a great team of folks that helps us track this. It was brought up earlier that Mary had said we use a software called Zendesk. It's been really, really helpful. We've been using it for a couple of years now. Helps us track any complaints and compliments that come in, route them to the appropriate folks to get those answers and to get answers to the public. and to follow up on what's going on. You can see here on-time performance for the whole year, we had 1 complaint. To where it doesn't even register, it says it's 0%. So we're very proud of that. I can tell you that in years past, when we were having real issues on lines, that was a significant number. So that's great. The traditionally passenger relations and definitions of these are in your staff report. But passenger relations is, you know, they had some type of interaction with the driver that was negative for them. And so that's what those complaints are about. Missed passenger is I was at the stop and the bus passed me up. Missed stop is I was on the bus, I pulled the cord, they didn't stop for my stop. Compliments are self-explanatory and we love them. Too full to board means people were, and this was up this past year, right? Because we had such a strict capacity limit. Too full to board was I was at the stop and it said bus full and passed me by that way. So it's not that the bus didn't see them, but the bus was too full and I missed my trip. And then driving observation is usually from other motorists or just people on the street who had some type of complaint about what they perceived as our driver, an issue with the driver. So with the actual driving. And my last slide here, we look at passenger boardings per complaint. So in the grand scheme of how many people rode the bus, per boardings, number of boardings, how many complaints did we get? Our performance target is over 10,000 boardings per complaint. We consistently hit that. The issue now is with ridership being so much lower, complaints are pretty low, but so is ridership. So it sort of skews it in a particular way. So we, generally we've got, these bars are much higher. There's a lot more boardings per complaint. But just to clarify, it's not because we're having a lot more complaints. It's because we're having, fewer passengers than normal. So with that, that's my last slide. Stop sharing my screen and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Hillary. Interesting and fun presentation, and very interesting given the weird year that we just went through in that regard, for sure. Questions for Ms. Blackerby? Director Limburger, Jen.
Yeah, in regards to the bicycle capacity, it's a nice, hopeful trend we look to hopefully continue. So we're only down 1.5%, but what does that look like in terms of our capacity in the bike carrying? And then as well, we're clearly going to be looking at this going forward and what that might look like in terms of capacity planning, if that ever comes up.
Sure, good question. So that's a great question about, how many bikes can we carry versus how many are being used. It's a little hard to, so for right now, except for one bus, all of our buses, except for the electric shuttles, those actually don't at this point have bike racks. But the others, they can carry 2. We have one that we've been testing that carries 3 bikes. And it's my understanding that they've been now for ones that need to be replaced. And then on new buses that we're ordering, they'll have those 3-position bike racks. And it's been in a test for a while. We've gotten, and we didn't get any negative feedback from the drivers who were testing it out. Jerry, do you want to?
Yeah, I think that's always been the key, is we want the input of our employees when we do something like this. It's, significant change, but it's being done all over the state. I mean, there are other agencies that have 3 bike racks, but we need to make sure with the fleet we have that it's that it can be accommodated. With new buses, we're certainly ordering it that way, and we'll move forward and hopefully get there with our entire fleet at some point. But we want to make sure we do it with our employees and our customers in mind.
Yeah, and the great thing about those bike racks, the test one that we've had, in addition to it carrying 50% more bikes, is that it has, there's room for thicker tires, and there's a lot of thicker tires out there, a lot more mountain bikes, e-bikes, things like that. And so we actually tested that out. We assist in the SB Bike and Coast bike camps every year, and where kids get to practice putting their bikes on the front of the bus. And in the past year or so, there've been a lot fatter tires that don't fit on our regular rack. So we actually got to test some out on the new, and it fit all of the ones that they had. So there's just some sort of, as you would imagine, in future generations of any type of, technology or whatever, they've kind of figured out what they need to do. So to your question about total capacity, it's hard to say because it's like any given minute someone takes their bike off or on or whatever. So I don't really have an answer for that. But in general, like Jerry said, it seems like we've gotten really good feedback from our employees because they're the ones who have to drive the thing on the front of the bus. And yeah, haven't heard any negative feedback. So it looks like that's a direction we'll be going soon.
Great.
Other questions? Right. Director Sarkar, Arjun.
Thank you. I had a quick question for the line 20 numbers in the top right 5 lines. Does that include the 20X? Well, it would have included the 20X as well in that number, or is that broken out somewhere else?
So since the 21X, which was our express between Carpinteria and Santa Barbara, has been suspended for a few years, not related to the pandemic, but frankly related to the freeway construction,
Right.
We put all of those hours into the 20. And we've really seen 20 ridership go up actually more than, this is before the pandemic, but more than the combined ridership of the previous 20 and 21X.
Mhm.
So it's, in the morning and the AM and PM peak, it's actually 15-minute frequency and then goes into 30. And so it's sort of better service than it used to be, but it is still local. It doesn't have that express. We don't have that express out there running.
Right. Thank you.
Mhm.
Great. Other questions? I had one, Hillary. It's more of a comment on the customer service statistics slide that you had there, the big circle one. I really like that number one in terms of how that's shown or whatever. I'm just wondering whether in the future we could talk about those issues per revenue hour, which kind of then would kind of say, are issues going up or down based upon the service we have on the street? Just a thought, because again, we're in such a weird period that we've just gone through. I don't know if 100 complaint here is up or down compared to the history, but going forward, if we looked at it on a per revenue hour basis, right, that's complaint per revenue hour, that tells us basically in terms of performance, are we improving or are we having an issue? So just a thought.
Yeah, and just anecdotally, based on being the person who tracks these kinds of things, it's, as we start to get more riders in, just like the more people that are interacting with the bus, those numbers will go up. But in relation to, like you said, additional revenue hours, additional service, it kind of, works itself out. So
Yeah. It'd be interesting just to play with that to see what we get to measure those things. So they're apples to apples.
Yeah.
Anyway, good report. Other comments? Paula, I saw your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Mainly it's a comment. I just want to thank Hillary and staff for all the hard work that you've all had to go through. It's like been a roller coaster ride for all of you. And I applaud the work that MTD has done, and I'm proud to be part of an organization that is keeping up with everything. And I know it can't be easy. So thank you.
Thank you, and want to thank, as always, Jennifer Tanner and Mark Clyde for their work in the planning department, getting, dealing with all these numbers on a, daily basis, crunching all the numbers from the fare box. And, there's a lot of sausage making that goes into it on the back end that is not particularly exciting or sexy, but it tells a story in the long run. So I want to thank them for their work, and more than, on this reporting stuff, just all the work that's been done by planning and operations in the last year and a half to anticipate service needs, deal with, what kind of human resources we have to deal with as far as what we can put out there. And so I think the pandemic has brought planning and operations even closer in needing to work together to see what kind of service we have out there. And then of course, obviously to the riders for sticking with us. So thank you.
Yeah, obviously, I think we'd all like to second those compliments to the staff. Thank you for putting that out there, Hillary. And every time we get a report like this and then we look at our service changes, I'm just amazed at what your staff does. It's again, it's such a complicated equation, and yet it's a miracle in terms of how things all work out every morning. The buses roll out on time. So great job, everyone. Okay, Madam Clerk, is anyone wishing to speak under this item?
I don't have any comments.
Don't have any comments. Okay, this was an informational item. And again, thank you, Hillary, for the presentation. And again, thanks for all the good hard work.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's move on then to item 9. This is the Santa Barbara County Association of Governments Subrecipient Agreement. Mr. Estrada.
Yeah, I'll be handing this off to Steve Moss to quickly walk you through this particular agreement. I think he'll be able to provide you with the background, but essentially it's setting up what's appropriate to be able to transfer some of the aid funds to SBCAG for the Clean Air Express. Steve?
Thank you, General Manager, and good morning, Chair Davis and members of the board. So you may be familiar, MTD and transit agencies around the country were beneficiaries of 3 separate coronavirus relief acts passed by the federal government. If you like acronyms, there's a comment earlier. We've got the CARES Act, the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act of 2020. We've got the CRISA, the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act of 2021, and the ARPA, the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. So the 3, Section 5307, FTA Section 5307 Urbanized Area Formula Fund recipients in the county, which is us, SMAT, which is City of Santa Maria Transit, and COLT, which is Lompoc Transit, were recipients from these pots of money. And SBCAG asked that those three operators provide some funds to them from the coronavirus relief funds for their pandemic-related expenses for the Clean Air Express. They asked for 1.2 million. Each of the 3, we all agreed to provide them with 400,000. And that's what this agreement is about, is for us to pass through 400,000 of our CRISA Act funds to SBCAG. We will then be responsible for ensuring that SBCAG remains in compliance with all of the FTA requirements that go along with those funds. It's a long list. I've listed several of them in the staff report. I won't go over them here unless you have any questions. And that's not a complete list. That's just some of the major things. So the agreement itself, SBCAG passed the main agreement on July 15th. You're asked to pass it today. In the course of preparing for this meeting, I discovered listing a table of FTA requirements of some data that was not included in that original agreement. And that's amendment number 1. It's nothing substantive, it's just information. And so I've attached that with SBCAG, assuming your board passes that today. SBCAG will then take it to their board at their September meeting for them to pass the amendment. And if that's it, really. If you have any questions, I'd be glad to try and answer them.
Hey, thank you, Steve. Questions from the board? Director Sheeler, Bill.
Thank you, Chair. There's a lot of requirements in order to effectuate this agreement. Is it correct that all of the 3 participating transit operators are required to review the Clean Air Express's agency safety plan to ensure its adequacy?
Everybody will be required, all three of the recipients, the 5307 recipients, will be required to ensure that SBCAG is in compliance with all those requirements. It doesn't necessarily mean SBCAG has to have their own public transit agency safety plan. It needs to be addressed in the plans of the agencies, and we may need to add something into our own plan. I have to look into that a little bit more closely.
Yeah, I was going to say, so I guess the assumption is that all three transit operators would come to a meeting of the minds to say that they have a satisfactory agency safety plan. If one somehow said, we have some concerns about that, I guess that might affect the overall validity of the agreement.
Well, we just have to make sure that they do comply. That's what it comes down to. The agreement will be valid. We just need to make sure that SBCAG stays in compliance. And, I didn't want to make it sound so bad. I mean, SBCAG does the majority of these things already as part of their own requirements to the FTA and the Federal Highway Administration.
Will this be a significant amount of MTD staff time to ensure safety compliance for another agency?
Well, it'll be some for sure. I'm hopeful that it won't be very much of my time primarily to make sure that they're in compliance.
All right, thanks.
Other questions? Director Tabor, Vice Chair Tabor, Dave.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Moss, do we know what these funds will be used for? What was our $400,000 or the total 1.2 million be used for?
They're intending to use all of it for operating expenses. They were fare free for much of the last year, and they've reinstated fares now, but their ridership is still down substantially from what it was prior.
All right, thanks.
Other questions? Okay, let me go to the clerk and see, is there anyone wishing to speak under this item before we move on?
Don't have any comments.
Thank you very much, Christina. That brings us back to the board. The request is for the board to approve an agreement and amendments for SBCAG to be a subrecipient to MTD for the $400,000. Okay, looking for a motion to that effect.
Sure, I'd move to approve the attached agreement and the amendment.
There we go. I have a motion from Director Tabor. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, Director Sarkar has seconded it. I have a motion and a second. We will do a roll call vote on the motion. Director Sarkar.
To approve.
To approve. Thank you. Director Limburger.
Aye.
Director Perotti.
Aye.
Director McCrory is absent. Director Sheeler.
Yes.
Vice Chair Tabor.
Yes.
And I vote yes. The motion passes 6 with one absent. Thank you very much, Mr. Moss, for the presentation.
Thank you.
Mr. Estrada for bringing this to us. And Jerry, I also want to compliment you basically for working with Director Kern over at SBCAG to get this done, and the cooperation that we've done to pass this through, I think shows goodwill. Thank you very much.
Certainly.
Okay, item 10, update 2021 board committee assignments. Staff is suggesting that Director Limburger and Director Sarkar fill the Finance and Human Resources Risk Committee vacancies for the duration of this year, 2021. Jerry, you want to add anything to that?
No, not much. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. We need to fill those seats so we can have a committee meeting, and we do look forward to having those soon. And then we're going to reassess. Typically in January, the committees, we do the election of officers in November.
Yeah. So we're tyranny of the majority, trying to put you guys on committees. So any objection from either of you two are sitting on those committees? Okay, I'm not seeing any objections. And I don't think we need an action here. Jerry, you want to, or Christina, let the record show that they were appointed by the board by unanimous consent.
So noted.
General Manager's report, Mr. Estrada. Jerry.
As you can see from my written report, we've been rather busy. The staff is doing a fantastic job of getting things done, in my opinion. Appreciate, for the board being able to be dark in August, we were able to continue that. We were looking to maybe do a planning and marketing committee meeting in September, but I discussed that with Chair Davis, the agenda item. We think we're going to bring it to the full board instead at the next meeting in September. And then we'll follow up with that. And it has to do with the short range transit plan, kind of the kickoff. But we think because we do have 2 new board members, we felt it was better to kind of share that with everyone and then go to the planning and marketing committee. So that's why we're moving that to the full board for the kickoff, just to give you an update on where we are with that. From the general manager's report, First of all, I do want to recognize the leadership of Hillary Blackerby, our planning and marketing manager, throughout the pandemic, done a fantastic job of working with the school districts and the entire team, working with the operations department, and also acknowledge our frontline workers again. I've done so throughout the pandemic, and we're still in this situation. I think we'd all hope maybe we'd be a little bit further along. We wouldn't have the capacity restrictions that we do. Unfortunately, they're still in place. And we don't want to forget those individuals, our employees that are out there and continue to do a great job. And, with that in the GM report, I mentioned that we've, for the first time, started those booster services to the schools. We've also, again, started the 15 acts and the 16 line to City College, first time since March of 2020. There's still a number of services that continue to be suspended, and that's primarily due to lack of drivers. We're hiring, and we're going to continue probably down that path. It's very competitive out there at this point, but we are, I'm proud of what the HR department is doing to try and recruit and get folks in here. I want to acknowledge Mr. Eddie Pacheco, one of our supervisors, for completing the instructor's course on transit trainers. Again, this is consistent with our operations department and what you heard earlier with PTASP and making sure we have folks that are staying up to date on current practices, et cetera. So I want to, kudos to Eddie for getting that done. We really appreciate that. Our Tap to Ride pilot project with Cal ITIP is going well. It's the first phase. The Clean Air Express is also doing a pilot project. We're together, essentially the third agencies in the state to be doing the contactless payment system. That pilot will run through January. We are also working closely with the state on a phase 2 and phase 3 that we're trying to squeeze into this pilot. Phase 2 is commuter tax benefit trial with UCSB's TAP program. And I think we're really close to being able to try that for a month or two. Again, what we're really doing is helping the state help us, our industry, by giving them a platform to test this technology and to help get through some of the obstacles and hurdles that our MTD and our peers in the industry face. That's one of them. The third one, phase 3, that we're trying to work with is the student bus pass program. And I know UCSB staff is really inundated these days, and we really appreciate their help with phase 2. We may be working with City College on phase 3 for just a month or two to test the student bus pass program with Cal ITIP. So it could be either UCSB or City College for phase 3. Also wanted to recognize or acknowledge MTD was very fortunate. In August, the Federal Transit Administration reached out to Mr. Moss, who is our point person with FTA, and does a great job of, with that relationship out of the LA office, essentially offering us about $3.8 million in additional federal transit funding for capital programs and for capital projects. And we were honored to be thought of, and we were able to act quickly. And that's, I want to acknowledge the work of the board. And from the strategic plan to all the other work that we've done, we've always been postured so that if there's an opportunity like this, we can act quickly. And we were able to get one of our projects, essentially approved or signed off. And we've submitted the grant application. We're waiting for final approval. SBCAG was kind enough to send a letter saying they would be willing to recommend FTIP amendment change, which is necessary in September to their board. So we're getting close. I hope to have the final thumbs up on that by the end of the month. What that will allow us to do is increase our order of 4 40-foot zero emission buses, battery electric, from 4 to 9. And the good news is, again, from a positioning, is that we focused on infrastructure at MTD. Everybody's in a hurry to buy the buses, but you need to be able to support them, obviously. Our Charge Ready project with Southern California Edison here at Terminal 1 is going to give us 15 ports in the ports for charging heavy duty buses in the center canopy area. So that's how we'll be able to support these 9 vehicles. So we're excited about that and looking forward to getting that thumbs up. Also, the kickoff meeting with the California Energy Commission has taken place for our blueprint for zero emission resilient transportation, which again is heavy duty, medium duty projects. We're hoping that we're able to come up with a blueprint that we could use here for microgrid that potentially could be carried over to our Terminal 2 facility and used really anywhere for fleets our size. So we're excited by that opportunity and getting that going. The staff's doing a great job. Also, again, another audit. One thing you'll learn about MTD is, I've said it many times, we get audited about 5 times every 3 years. Just from a financial side, it's annually. The state, through their triennial performance audits, handles performance and the state's review of us, and that's now kicked off. So we're going through that, and that's actually one of the audits that I think look at the most, because it looks at all of our agencies, looks how we're performing in the county versus the TDA requirements. But it's really good information that's going to come out of that, and opportunity to improve your services when you look at that. And of course, there's the federal triennial review, which we just successfully completed just about a month ago. So for Steve and his role and the entire staff of the management team, it's just on to the next audit. We also completed the CHP audit successfully for our facility, which that would, I guess, make it 9 or 8 audits every 3 years when you throw that in as well. Beyond that, I think I just wanted to highlight the work of Valerie White, our purchasing agent. And she's really keeping things moving. Been a great addition to our team during the pandemic. Currently, she's got the construction management services solicitation out. This is a critical need for us. It'll be on-call services as we start to recommission Terminal 2 with some of the work here at Terminal 1. We really need a professional like that to help us move those things along, to supplement the work that Stantec does for us on-call architectural and engineering. So that's where we are right now. That's my update, and happy to answer any questions.
A lot of stuff going on, Mr. Estrada, a lot of stuff. Questions for Jerry, Director Tabor.
Mr. Chair, with that $3.8 million showing up at our doorsteps, is that the first time you've ever seen "Don't call us, we'll call you" turn out positively?
Probably, yes.
That's good. Okay. Jerry.
That's
Good
it.
work, man. Good work. You guys are keeping your head above water. It's been a heck of a ride. So yeah, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Okay, we have going to item 12 and 13. We have 2 closed sessions, which I will look for if there's any public comment in recess to closed session. First one is recess to closed session with labor negotiations pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6. The agency designated representatives, MTD General Manager Jerry Estrada, and Interim Chief Operating Officer, Chief Safety Officer Mary Gregg. The employee organization is the International Brotherhood of Teamsters Union, Local 186. Item 13 is a recess to closed session on real property negotiations pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.8. The property is at 4678 Kyriel, 149 North San Antonio Road. Agency negotiators are General Manager Jerry Estrada, outside counsel Graham Lyons. Negotiating partners are Chandler Partners and Con Am Group under negotiation of the price in terms of payment. Madam Clerk, is there anyone wishing to speak for either of these 2 closed sessions?
Quiet today. We don't have any comments.
No comments on these 2 items. With that, we will stand in recess to closed session. Jerry, take us a few minutes to get